Tuhan membara langit biru mencari ilmu, berteman kebudimanan, bina nusa bina dunia sejahtera. Uni utama ibu yang tercinta, kami doa lanjut usia bahagia. Kami janji hormati pesanmu, ilmu budi dan bakti. Kami anak alam insan Tuhan, membara langit biru mencari ilmu, berteman kebudimanan, bina nusa bina dunia sejahtera. Uni utama ibu yang tercinta, kami doa lanjut usia bahagia. Kami janji hormati pesanmu, ilmu budi dan bakti. Ilmu budi dan bakti.
Hadirin dipersilakan duduk. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam Malaysia Madani dan salam biru warna. Majlis pertamanya mengalu-alukan kehadiran yang berusaha Profesor Dr. Muhammad Azizuddin Muhammad Sani, Timbalan Naib Chancellor Akademik dan Antarabangsa. Yang berusaha Profesor Dr. Abdul Halim Abdul Majid, Pengerusi Majlis Profesor UUM. Yang berusaha Profesor Town Planner Dr. Dani Saleh, Profesor Pusat Pengajian Kerajaan UUM College of Law, Government and International Studies. Yang berusaha para profesor, tetamu-tetamu jemputan, pegawai-pegawai kanan UUM, Sekretariat Majlis, seterusnya tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian. Selamat datang ke Majlis Syarahan Pengukuhan Profesor bertajuk Empowering Citizens Through Development Plan Literacy, A Key to Inclusive Growth, yang akan disampaikan oleh yang berusaha Profesor Town Planner Dr. Dani Saleh. Pertamanya, marilah kita sama-sama menzahirkan rasa syukur kehadrat Allah kerana dengan limpah perkenan dan izinnya dapat kita berhimpun pada pagi yang indah ini bagi meraihkan Majlis Syarahan Pengukuhan Profesor Siri 4 bagi tahun 2025. Untuk makluman hadirin sekalian, program Syarahan Pengukuhan Profesor adalah suatu program khusus yang dianjur bagi menonjolkan ketokohan ahli akademik yang dilantik sebagai profesor di Universiti Utara Malaysia. Program syarahan ini menyentuh satu aspek strategik dalam pembangunan dan kefahaman rakyat terhadap pelan pembangunan yang mampu memberdayakan rakyat untuk terlibat secara lebih aktif dalam proses pembangunan negara. Literasi ini penting bagi memastikan pertumbuhan yang lebih inklusif, adil dan menyeluruh di mana setiap suara rakyat diambil kira dalam membentuk masa depan yang lebih mampan. Hadirin sekalian, bagi memberkati majlis pada hari ini, dipersilakan Al-Fadil Ustaz Sharif Abdul Salam dari Pusat Islam UUM untuk memimpin bacaan doa. Dipersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Hamdan yuwafi ni'amahu wa yukafi'u mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karim wa 'azimi sultanik. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Dengan nama Allah yang Maha Pemurah lagi Maha Penyayang, segala puji dan syukur kami panjatkan kehadrat-Mu ya Allah, Tuhan yang memiliki segala keagungan ilmu dan kemuliaan hikmah. Dengan izin-Mu jua kami berhimpun dalam sebuah majlis yang mulia, penuh dengan sinar keintelektualan dan pancaran kemegahan akademik, syarahan pengukuhan Profesor, lambang kejayaan dalam medan keilmuan yang tiada berpenghujung. Ya Allah, Tuhan yang mencipta minda manusia dengan kebijaksanaan, yang menyuluh kegelapan dengan cahaya ilmu, kami bermohon kepadamu ya Allah, limpahkanlah keberkatan kepada majlis ini. Jadikanlah ia saksi keilmuan yang menyemarakkan semangat pengetahuan dan memperkukuh martabat institusi kami, Universiti Utara Malaysia yang tercinta, sebagai menara ilmu yang menjulang tinggi di persada antarabangsa. Ya Allah, peliharalah universiti yang tercinta ini ya Allah, agar terus unggul sebagai menara ilmu yang memimpin ummah, melahirkan generasi berwawasan, berintegriti dan berjiwa besar, yang berbakti kepada agama, bangsa, tanah air dan tercinta. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas sami'ul alim wa tub alaina innaka antat tawwabur rahim. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Terima kasih Al-Fadhil Ustaz atas pimpinan bacaan doa itu tadi. Hadirin sekalian, majlis diteruskan dengan ucapan pengenalan Profesor. Untuk itu, majlis dengan penuh takzimnya mempersilakan Yang Berusaha Profesor Dr. Hasnizam Syari untuk tampil ke hadapan bagi menyampaikan ucapan pengenalan Profesor. Majlis turut mempersilakan Yang Berusaha Profesor Town Planner Dr. Dani Saleh untuk mengambil tempat di atas pentas. Yang Berusaha Prof sekalian dengan segala hormatnya dipersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi. Distinguished guests, colleagues, students and friends. Professor Dani Saleh. The journey of Professor Dani Saleh begins in Kuala Terengganu on 22nd February 1966, where he was born into the loving care of his parents, Haji Saleh bin Zaid and Zainun binti Muhammad. Growing up as part of a large family with 15 siblings, he was immersed in an environment where mutual support, cooperation, and perseverance were central values. Life in Terengganu during the late 1960s and 70s, with its fishing village, rivers, and bustling town centers, shaped his awareness that space, planning, and livelihood were deeply intertwined. The value of his parents instilled in Professor Dani the principle of integrity, humility, and service to others. Teachers during his formative years in Kuala Terengganu nurtured his intellectual curiosity and encouraged him to imagine how communities could be better designed and governed. In his personal life, Professor Dani treasures his children Izul Hilman, Nuraini Suhaila, Muhammad Sufi, and Ish Humaira, who serve as source of strength and inspiration. They remind him that work of planning is ultimately about building the future for the next generation. The formal education of Professor Dani began at Sekolah Rendah Kebangsaan Menggabang Teleport and continued at Sekolah Menengah Tunku Mizan, both in Kuala Terengganu. He then pursued higher education at University of Science Malaysia, USM, completing the matriculation program before enrolling in the Bachelor of Science in Housing, Building and Planning with honors. He advanced to the Master Degree in Urban Planning at USM, where he first linked to the technical aspect of planning to the broader societal implication. His academic journey culminated in the PhD in Urban and Regional Planning at University of Technology Malaysia, UTM, specializing in infrastructure, procurement and planning law. His academic journey, this period of training consolidated a multidisciplinary foundation in architecture, poverty development, planning law and governance that continues to inform his scholarship. During his time in the first degree and master, his capability and talent to carry out consultation works was attracted by many consulting lecturers. He was hired by many lecturers and private consulting firms to carry out development project proposals and feasibility studies. The career path of Professor Dani has been diverse and purposeful. He began as a tutor and research officer at USM before joining the planning department of the Penang Island Municipal Council in 1992 as a town planning officer cum assistant director, where he responsible for outside city areas, whereas his colleague Puan Maimunah Muhammad Sharif, now Datuk Sri, the present mayor of City Hall of Kuala Lumpur, responsible for the city area. Those roles exposed him to the interplay of academic insight and practical governance. From 1992 to 2010, he also served as a planning consultant with the various architectural and planning firms, gaining first-hand professional experience in project feasibility, urban development, and housing development. After gaining years of professional practice, he later was accepted as corporate member of Malaysian Institute of Planners, MMIP, as qualified chartered town planner. These positions reflect his lifelong commitment to integrating scholarship with practice, ensuring that research informs policy and governance. The intellectual contributors of Professor Dani span several themes. First, planning laws and infrastructure procurement, advancing model, transparent or role-based contributions, ensuring that early planning decisions yield traceable public benefits, urban planning and poverty development, developing insight on tourism-linked river development, urban housing and land use governance, and the last, development plan literacy, DPL, his flagship concept, asserting that planning literacy is a precondition for the spatial justice. Through books, journal articles, policy papers, and training modules, Professor Dani has consistently bridged theory and practice, enabling local government and communities to engage meaningfully in the development processes. Professor Dani's expertise has earned recognition beyond Malaysia. He has served as visiting professor in Indonesia, China, and contributed to forums in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Thailand, and Japan. His contributions include leading or participating in major master plans and studies such as Pelan Induk Pembangunan Bumi Putera Pulau Pinang 2026 until 2035, Labuan Development Master Plan, study on Klang Valley Affordable Housing, which informed the establishment of TRIPAN, National Construction Master Plan 1995, feasible study of Bukit Kayu Hitam Border Town Development, Sungai Kedah and Sungai Anak Bukit Redevelopment Program Alustar Kedah. These reflect the career grounded in the people-centered and evidence-based planning. As director of ILG-SOG, Professor Dani has positioned the Institute at the national hub for the local government excellence, collaborating with the Plan Malaysia, Giat Mara, the Prime Minister's Department, and state agencies to strengthen capacity building. As a teacher and mentor, Professor Dani has supervised numerous PhD and master students, many of whom who serve in academia, government, and the private sector. His teaching emphasized critical thinking, dialogue, and civic responsibility. Professor Dani's expertise and leadership have earned him international recognition. He has been a valued and expert in urban planning in many countries such as China as an adjunct professor, Australia, New Zealand, Johannesburg, South Africa, Indonesia as a visiting professor, Thailand, and very recent was invited as panel in urban redevelopment program at Yabu City in the prefecture Kobe, Japan. He has contributed to ASEAN forums and smart cities and inclusive urbanism. His regional works reflect a consistent commitment to knowledge exchange, cultural sensitivity, and ethical planning. The vision of Professor Dani is guided by the three interlinked priorities. The first, institutionalizing development plan literacy into the state plans, local authority processes, and educational curricula. Second, strengthening local infrastructure procurement, refining a rule-based, transparent model of planning contributions that ensure public benefit. And third, integrating finance and planning, connecting financial systems, ESG, and ownership structures with the sustainable urban governance. Underlying this vision in the conviction that professors are not only educators, but also custodians to the public knowledge and civic empowerment. Reflecting on the journey from the childhood in Terengganu to the present, the story of Professor Dani underscores a central belief: knowledge must serve humanity. For him, planning has never been about line of map, but about life, communities, and futures. His professional journey is not a solitary one, but a collective path shared with the students, colleagues, institutions, and communities. This inaugural lecture stands not just a personal milestone, but as a reminder that the true purpose of scholarship is to inspire transformation, to empower citizens, and to build future which no one is left behind. With that, thank you.
Terima kasih Tuan Azam Marni selaku pengacara majlis pada pagi ini. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. And very good morning. Yang berusaha Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, UUM State Secretary Office of Kedah, representative from various municipalities in Kedah, Plain Malaysia, Pejabat Projek Utara, and my deepest thankful to Director General of Plain Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, let me ask you one question. Who actually owns the cities? Some of you might be thinking this is a government. After all, they make the policy, they pass the law, and control the budget. And others might say that it's developers, because for them, they saw that they buy land, put up building, and seem to shape the skyline. And some of you might even say, no one really owns it. City just grows naturally, like plant in garden. But here, this is my answer. It might surprise you. The cities belong to those who understand how it was built. The analogy is that when you read the books, you understand what is the book is about, even you are not own the books. That is the real ownership of the books. However, if we own 100 books, but yet none of the books we read, it means nothing. We don't know what is discussed by the books or by the authors. Even generation, our settlement in our stay in this country, we actually don't know what's actually really happened. What we aware, just the development project, day by days, months by months, years by years, taking place in our neighborhood. And only the residents start questioning or protesting the moment the project completely just develop and start deteriorating our environments or their neighborhood. And this is already too late. The real story behind of this, because many of us don't understand how the development is take place. They do not know how the development process is carried out. Then this is the fundamental things I want to discuss this morning. Let me tell you why. Many years ago, in my experience, I was attending the town hall meeting about the redevelopment project somewhere in Penang. The room was full. On one side, planners, officers. On the others, residents, mothers, fathers, grandfathers, grandparents, children. The planning consultant and government planners began their presentation. Slide after slide flashed across the screen. Floor areas, ratio, zoning maps, traffic projection, cost benefit. All the jargon terminology used by the consultant. It all looks very professional and technical. And then, in the middle of presentation, an elderly man stood. His hands were trembling, but his voice very clear. He asked me one question, just one. Does this mean my house will be gone? That moment struck me like lightning. It was not about numbers of maps. It was not about diagrams or master plan. It was about fear. Fear of losing a home, fear of losing neighbor, fear of losing community that has been years, even generation to build by the community. In that moment, I realized something important. The problem was not the people didn't care about the development. They cared deeply. The problem was that the language of planning, it was a foreign language for them. Imagine it this way. Planning documents are written like the thick law books full of jargons, terms like floor areas, mixed use zoning, density control, and etc., etc. For most ordinary citizens, those words mean nothing. It's like it's been given a medical precision written in Latin. How can you possibly understand what is going to happen to your neighborhood, your street, your home? So that is when I realized knowledge is not just power in planning. Knowledge is ownership. If you cannot read the plan, you cannot shape the plan. If you cannot interpret the future that is being drawn on papers, then your future is being decided without you. And that is why today I want to talk to you about something meaningful and something transformative. It's about development plan literacy. The word sounds technical, but really it's quite simple. It's about the abilities of citizens, ordinary citizens, people like you and me, people from all walks of life to read, to understand, and to question the plan that shape our town and cities. Because here is the truth. When citizens can read their city, they can also rewrite their future. The city is not just built with bricks and mortar. It is built with understanding. And those who understand it, own it. Why development plan literacy matters? So what do I mean by when I say development plan literacy? Let me be clear. I'm not talking about turning every citizen into the professional town planners or architect. I'm not saying You need to memorize building codes of master GIS software. Development plan literacy simply means this: the ability to understand, question, and act upon planning document. Things like local plans, zoning maps, environmental assessment, that very document that shape our future neighborhood. Now, why does this matter so much? Because planning is not just about drawing or diagram. Planning is to determine where we live. Will there be affordable housing in your neighborhood? How we travel, the air we breathe, the opportunities we can access. Will your community get school, clinics, and jobs within reach? Or will development bypass you completely? You see, every single line on the zoning maps carries a silent message about your future. And those documents are written in a language that ordinary people cannot understand. Let me give you a very real example. In Penang, the Transport Master Plan was announced with much excitement. It promised highways, LRT system, and new reclaimed islands. But when the environmental report, EIA, was finally released, there were hundreds of pages long document filled with technical terms and legal jargon. Now imagine you are the fisherman whose livelihood depends on the sea. You open the report, do you see your future? No, you see confusion. The irony is that those most affected, the fishing community, could not even understand the document that decided their fate. So I ask you, is that real participation or tokenism? Real participation means more than just being invited to a meeting. It means having the knowledge to ask the right question. This plan does not reflect our needs. It means being able to protect your community, your home, your heritage. Without development plan literacy, planning becomes a technocratic veil, a mask that hides inequality behind glossy maps and fancy terms. But with development plan literacy, planning becomes a democratic tool, a way for citizens to stand side by side with experts and say, we understand, we have the voice, and our voice matters. But it does not have to be this way. Development plan literacy gives every citizen the rule book. It says, here are the plans. Here is what they mean. Here is how you can respond. If you can't read the plan, you can't change the plan. If you can't read the plan, you don't just lose a document, you lose your future. That's a reality. What is the core of development plan literacy? Now, what we have talked about why development plan literacy matters. Let's break it down into its core parts. Development plan literacy is not a single skill. This is actually a combination of three interconnected literacies: functional, critical, and participatory. Functional literacy means that the first level is functional literacy. This is the most basic step. It's about being able to read the document, to recognize what the colors on the zoning maps means, to understand that residential zone means houses, apartments, no factory or shopping mall. For example, imagine you are handed a document plan, a local plan, and you see a red area marked commercial zone. Without functional literacy, citizens are like drivers who cannot recognize a stop sign. The second is critical literacy. But functional literacy alone is not enough. The second level is critical literacy. Critical literacy is being able to not just read the rule on the roadside, but to ask why. Are these rules written this way? Who benefits from these traffic laws? Without critical literacy, citizens may accept everything as natural as for the greater good. The third one is participatory literacy. And then we come to the third and most powerful level, participatory literacy. There is a where knowledge turns into action. It is not enough to simply understand or to critique. They read the document, they understood the impact, and they prepare collective responses. That is participatory literacy in action. Only then are you truly part of the system. Driving analogy. Let's extend this analogy of learning to drive because it captures development plan literacy beautifully. The first, you learn the sign and rule. That's functional literacy. You can read the maps, recognize the zoning codes. Then you understand why those rules exist. That is critical literacy. You know why the speed limit is there, why you should not overtake at a curve. Finally, you actually drive. That is participatory literacy. You navigate the road, interact with other drivers, and reach your destination. In planning, the destination is not just physical places. The destination is a just, inclusive, and sustainable city. The true development plan literacy comes when all three functional, critical, and participatory work together. So a little bit I will discuss what is development plan. We're talking about development plan literacy. So what is development plan? Malaysia Development Planning System is guided by Town and Country Planning Act 1976, Act 172. This law provides the frameworks for how towns, cities, and rural areas grow in an orderly and sustainable way. Two key planning instruments under this system are structure plan and local plan. The first one, structure plan, it set out the broad development strategy for 15 to 20 years. Think of it as a roadmap that explains where industries, housing, and commercial areas should grow, and how transportation, highways, and rail should expand, which natural areas must be protected, forests, water catchment, agricultural land, etc., etc. The second level is local plan, or rancangan tempatan. It translates the broad strategy of the structure plan into specific land use maps, zoning, and regulation. It normally looks ahead of 10 to 15 years. Which land is for housing, industries, schools, hospitals, or parks? Building density, which is how tall or crowded development can be for the maximum development. Preservation zone, examples, heritage sites, environmentally sensitive area, all put it in the local plan. What is significant for the plan for the public? Is that really affect your neighborhood? What can be built next door to your house, or whether your compound land can be converted into housing? Because development plan is a legitimate document you have to follow. It shows where new facilities, new public facilities, clinics, playgrounds, market will be located. It provides transparency, so that the community knows the changes may happen in their areas. In short, the structure plan shows the strategic direction. It's more broader than local plan. Why? The local plan gives you the practical detail. Both are not just technical documents for the professional. They are public contract about how your town or city will grow. Understanding them empowers citizens to participate, protect their interests, and help shape a more inclusive, sustainable development of our country. So far, we have talked about what this literacy is and why it matters. Let me be very clear. Literacy is only the beginning. The real destination is something bigger, something stronger empowerment. Because what is the point of being able to read a plan if you cannot act on it? You got knowledge, you not practice. Empower means turning knowledge into action. It means citizens moving from passive observer to active shaper of their own future. When citizens understand the language of planning, they gain confidence. With understanding comes the ability to, first, negotiate, to sit across the table from developer and say, we know what this means and we want fair term, meaning that fair development, which benefited equally all foot of community. The second resist injustice, to say, no, this project will harm our community, and here is the evidence. Shape alternative, to say, yes, development is needed, but let's do it differently. Counter-propose to the government or private sector in the way that benefit everyone. This is the journey from literacy to empowerment. You got knowledge, you know how to use it, then you move on. Let me give you an example from Brazil. In cities like Porto Alegre, they pioneered something called participatory budgeting. Each year, citizens gather to decide how public money should be spent on school, roads, housing, water supply at the local level. This is not the politician alone making the decision. It is ordinary residents, sometimes from the poorest neighborhood, who stand up and say, this is what we need most. That is empowerment, not waiting for someone else to decide your future, but having a hand in shaping it. Another story is come from South Africa. Mostly is underdeveloped country. In many informal settlements, the government didn't even have accurate data on who lived there, where the houses were, or where the risks were. Without data, this community were invisible. So the residents took matters into their own hand. They began creating their own maps. They go to the authority and say, here we are. Here are our needs. Here is our community. You cannot ignore us anymore. Knowledge turned into voice. Voice turned into power. Another example in Malaysia, close to us, Penang Forest. I was there so many years. I working there as a town planner, also practicing as architect firm, also planning firm. I kind of crossed a lot of this experience. Take Penang Forest, for example, coalitions of civil society group. When the state government proposed ambitious development project, Penang Forum did not just criticize from sideline. They studied the document, the proposals proposed by the private sector or government sector. They understood the detail, and then they presented counter-proposal to the state government. This example shows that ordinary citizens, when armed with knowledge, could stand with professionals and offer credible alternatives. And whether or not the authorities accepted all their ideas, the fact is this. The debates was richer, the process was more democratic, and people's voice was heard. You see, literacy is about understanding the words. However, empowerment is about changing the story. Literacy lets you read a zoning map. Empowerment lets you defend your home. Literacy lets you decode the jargon. Empowerment lets you challenge the injustice hidden behind the jargon. Literacy lets you attend the consultation. Empowerment lets you transform that consultation into real influence. This is why development plan literacy is not just a skill. It's a stepping stone to something much larger, a culture of active, engaged, and empowered citizens. Reform ideas and innovation. Development plan literacy is more than a planning tool. It's a societal imperative. It is the foundation for meaningful participation, responsive government, and inclusive cities. A nation that's aimed to be sustainable, just, and people-centered must equip citizens with the knowledge to shape the space they live in. Today, Malaysia stands at the crossroad. The tool for inclusive development already exists. The policies are beginning to emerge. What is now required is not more document, but the political will to implement the National Strategy for Development Plan Literacy. To turn awareness to action, we need an urgent multi-stakeholder approach. This is a direct call to the relevant authorities to take leadership. First, Plan Malaysia must coordinate the national framework for planning education. Development plan literacy should be a key outcome of every state and local plan. The National Physical Plan itself should embedded with literacy indicator, while local plans should carry a strong public education component. Standardized toolkit and training of trainers program can have state roll out campaign quickly and effectively. The second, Ministry of Housing and local government must institutionalize the right to planning information. This requires reform to the Town and Country Planning Act and the establishment of our National Development Plan Literacy Unit. That unit should support local authorities with training, resources, and audits of participation quality, while federal development budget must ring-fence funding for literacy implementation. The third, Ministry of Education must begin early embedding special literacy into primary and secondary school curriculum. Our children should grow up understanding land use, environmental planning, and civic participation. District education officers can collaborate with planners so that classroom learning is tied to the real project in student own neighborhood. The fourth, the Ministry of Higher Education must ensure that universities play their parts. Planning, geography, and environment program should integrate community planning module and service learning as compulsory requirement. University should partner with the local council to co-design strategies funded by competitive research grants that link academia directly to the practice. And finally, local authority must be on the front line. Every local council should set up the planning literacy desk and citizen-friendly digital portal. Tool must be multilingual institutes and mobile-ready. Public education should even become part of star rating benchmark for PBT, not that outraged quality is measured and rewarded. In short, 5 actionable pillars must shape a national implementation strategy. The pillar number 1, the first pillar, National Program for Development Plan Literacy, a coordinated initiative integrated into policy. The second pillar is Citizen Accessible Planning Portal, so every citizen can explore and contribute to local plan. Now, what's happening many years, when the development plans, such as local plan and structure plan, come to for public participation is very rare. Community, the taxpayer from the local government concerned to participate and give their feedback for the development. Because the problem is because they don't know what's happening in the development plan. As I mentioned earlier in my earlier parts of my talk, some of them, I think most of them, they don't know what's happening in the development. So the pillar number 2, Citizen Accessible Planning Tool. So every citizen can explore and contribute to the local plan. There's a public participation. The third pillar is a mandatory community review panel, structured and empower participation in all major processes. The fourth pillar is capacity building partnership. Universities, NGO, councils working together to deliver literacy. And the pillar number 5, an AI-enhanced participatory tool, digital platform that stimulates outcomes, enables submissions, and enhance transparency. Here is the vision. So let me leave you with this. Cities should not be built for people. They should be built with people. Because when people are part of the process, cities stop being just concrete and steel. They become living testaments of our shaped hopes, values, and dreams. Let me take you back one final time to the story I shared at the beginning, at very beginning, the resident who stood up in a town hall meeting and asked with a trembling voice, "Does this mean my house will be gone?" I cannot forget his face. It was not the face of someone uninterested in planning. It was the face of someone excluded from it. A man who cared deeply about his home, his family, his community, but who could not find his voice in the language of floor areas, zoning codes, traffic projection. Now imagine if the story had unfolded differently. Can you see how different the moment would have been? From fear to confidence, from silence to voice, from exclusion to empowerment. This is the essence of development planning literacy. Not just reading maps, but reading our future. Development planning literacy is not just about reading maps. It's not about memorizing codes or becoming experts overnight. No, this is about reading something far more precious. It's about our shared future. It will be decided by those who can read, those who can understand, and those who can claim their right to the city. Let this vision not only inspirational but actionable. Let Malaysia lead the region in redefining planning as a shaped democratic enterprise. Let ministries, universities, civil society, and private developers all be held to new standards of openness and accessibility. This call is not rhetorical, it is urgent. As climate risks amount, as urban sprawl accelerates, and as inequality deepens, we must accept the planning literacy is not peripheral. It is central to climate resilience, to economic justice, and to our very national identity. Ultimately, inclusive growth is not a byproduct of GDP. It is a design choice. And that design must begin with an informed and empowered citizen. A Malaysia that is spatially literate will be a Malaysia that is socially just, economically resilient, and politically mature. Let's build that Malaysia together through knowledge, through participation, and through a shared vision of a just and inclusive future. So let me end with this. Cities should not be built for people. They should be built with people. Cities belong to those who understand how they are built. That is the vision, that is the challenge, and that is the future we must all work together. With that, I end my lecture. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Yang Berusaha Prof atas penyampaian syarahan sebentar itu tadi. Yang Berusaha Prof dimohon untuk terus kekal di pentas. Hadirin sekalian, sebagai tanda penghargaan dan kenang-kenangan kepada Yang Berusaha, Profesor Town Planner Dr. Dani Saleh yang telah menyampaikan syarahan sebentar tadi, dipersilakan Yang Berusaha, Profesor Dr. Abdul Halim Abdul Majid untuk mengiringi Yang Berusaha, Profesor Dr. Muhammad Azizuddin Muhammad Sani untuk tampil ke pentas bagi menyempurnakan sesi penyampaian cenderamata. Dengan segala hormatnya dipersilakan. Terima kasih yang berusaha Prof sekalian, dipersilakan untuk kembali ke tempat duduk utama. Hadirin sekalian, dengan berakhirnya penyampaian cenderamata itu tadi, maka program syarahan pengukuhan Profesor pada hari ini telah tiba ke penghujungnya. Saya bagi pihak majlis merakamkan ucapan jutaan terima kasih kepada seluruh hadirin atas kesudian meluangkan masa bagi menjayakan majlis yang sangat bermakna pada pagi ini. Sebelum bersurai, majlis mempersilakan para tetamu kehormat yang berusaha Prof serta seluruh hadirin sekalian untuk berdiri di tempat duduk masing-masing bagi bergambar kenang-kenangan. Dijemput para juru foto untuk mengambil tempat di hadapan bagi menyempurnakan sesi bergambar tersebut. Para hadirin dimohon berdiri dan bergerak ke tengah untuk bersesi bergambar. Dipersilakan. Mohon rapat ke tengah. Terima kasih.